The author's fundamentalist roots. I was saved in 1980 at the age of 33 years. I was baptized by the late Dr. Peter Eng, who was then Singapore's fighting fundamentalist and pastor of Jesus Saves Mission. 4 years after I got saved, I was ordained a minister in that church. In 1988, God used me to start Gospelite Christian Church, or GLCC. The late Dr. Bob Jones Jr., then Chancellor of Bob Jones University, Greenville, South Carolina, USA, was one of my early mentors. Since Bob Jones University is a bastion of fundamentalism, GLCC became strongly fundamentalist and a key part of Singapore's fundamentalist movement. In the 90s, I chaired the Asia Pacific Congress of Christian Fundamentalists, which organized congresses in different parts of Asia to strengthen the cause of fundamentalism. I edited the Asia Pacific Fundamentalist magazine for several years to promote fundamentalism in Asia. For my efforts in promoting the fundamentalist movement in Asia, I was conferred a Doctor of Divinity honoris causa by Bob Jones University. During this time, I became a proud fundamentalist who imagined myself to be a superior Christian. In the past 15 years, as I studied God's Word more and read fundamentalist books less, God began to show me many lessons that have humbled me greatly. In this small booklet, I want to share some of these lessons with my dear brethren in the Association of Fundamental Baptist Churches in the Philippines, or AFBCP, as you gather for this 2019 National Pastors and Workers Conference. I am thankful for the partnership of AFBCP for the past 30 years, and I believe that its strong biblical stand will be the foundation for huge potential growth in the near future. However, its immediate task is to stop the loss of its young people to the world and to other churches. I am dedicating this book to a man I considered to be a model Filipino fundamentalist, Dr. Antolin B. Zamar. Sir Zamar was the man whom God used to guide me as I started my ministry in the Philippines 40 years ago. I learned much from this godly man who was not afraid to admit his mistakes and do his best to obey God's word rather than the practices and traditions that he had been taught. May God bless and guide you as you read this book. May God mold you to be God's servant for the 21st century. May God raise AFBCP to bring Christ to the Philippines in the 21st century. Fundamentalism, a brief history. I believe that it is important for all of us who carry the name fundamentalist to understand our origins. Since this term fundamentalist was coined over 100 years ago, its meaning has evolved into something very different. Today, for most people, fundamentalist is synonymous with extremist, religious fanatic, or even terrorist. This is the reason why many fundamentalists have dropped the name and relabeled themselves. In the Philippines, Catholic fundamentalism is often associated with militant conservative Catholics who oppose the reproductive health law. However, for many members of AFBCP, the term fundamentalist is applied to someone dedicated to preserving the traditions of his church, especially the visible traditions of music, dress, and the style of the worship service, rather than the fundamentals of our faith. Fundamentalism started in the late 19th century in U.S. Protestantism as a response to the theory of evolution and the resultant modernist, higher criticism interpretation of the Bible. From Darwin's theory of evolution, the creation account in Genesis was not literal. Although Darwin's theory was just a theory, not a proven fact, many Christians began to doubt the Bible, and these scholars began to reinterpret the Bible to fit this theory. They began to reject the miraculous portions of the Bible. Thus, vital truths that were miraculous, such as the inspiration of the Bible, the virgin birth, the deity of Christ, the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, the physical return of Jesus Christ, were denied. These fundamental, foundational truths are vital for man's salvation, and their removal reduces our faith to a mere set of moral laws, and Christianity to merely another man-made religion. In response to this, the American Bible League published 12 booklets from 1910 to 1915 containing 90 essays defending the vital truths of the Christian faith. These booklets were entitled The Fundamentals, A Testimony to the Truth. A wealthy Christian financed the printing and free distribution of 3 million copies of these booklets. From the title of this booklet, the term fundamentalist was then applied to those who defended these vital truths. Organizations such as AFBCP were established to defend and fight for these truths. It is important to note that fundamentalists were raised to defend the fundamental truths of the Bible. For example, truths that are essential for our salvation. The topics of dress, music, style of worship, form of church government, method of baptism, though important, were not considered as fundamental truths of our faith. Today, about 100 years since the publication of the Fundamentals booklets, the modernist interpretation of the Bible is no more an issue in our churches, as these fundamental truths are now universally accepted in our churches. Since we have no more need to fight for these fundamental truths in our churches, pastors have chosen to fight over the non-fundamental issues of dressing, music, and etc. Since the Bible does not give clear rules on many practices, there will be many different interpretations of what are the best practices. For example, in many churches in Asia, the idea that men and women sit together in church is shocking to them. In others, the idea of using expensive musical instrument such as church organ is worldly to them. And in many churches, the idea that women use makeup is disgusting. Thankfully, we as fundamentalists do not need to fight or separate over these practices, but to defend with our lives the fundamentals of our faith. This fighting among ourselves over non-fundamental truths has greatly divided and weakened our churches, so that we have become such a small and marginalized group whose presence is insignificant and ignored. To fill the void that we have left, the voice of the prosperity, health, and wealth gospel has replaced the proclamation of the truths of salvation in Asia.